This is Chris Barnes, host of Supply Chain Now Radio, sponsored by APICS Atlanta and Talent Stream. Coming to you from hashtag Supply Chain City, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain, the people, the companies, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. In today's Profiles in Supply Chain Leadership, I'm with Mike Wasson, Chief Operations Officer of Atlanta-based Tosca. Mike, thanks for investing time with Supply Chain Now Radio today.
Chris, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Mike, congratulations on your recent promotion. I saw that in the news. Before we get there, let's rewind a little bit. Talk about your career projection. More specifically, where did you grow up and where did you go to college?
Sure, Chris. So I grew up actually in the Chicagoland area in the far south suburbs and went to college at Lewis University, which is also far south suburbs. And interestingly, a question I get a lot of times is, what was your major? What was your degree? How did you end up in supply chain? My degree was actually in marketing, and I got involved in supply chain early on as an intern, working for the vice president of sales and operations for a small manufacturing firm in Chicago. And I gravitated towards the operations side. My internship was really about marketing and learning the sales side of the business, but because my boss led both sides of the organization, I spent more time on the plant floor, working with supply chain, working with the production and the operations leadership, and really found my passion there, and that sort of led my career path from that moment on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm industrial engineering undergrad degree. And back when I was in college, I tell the younger kids today, logistics was a chapter in the marketing book, and that was about the extent of it.
That's right.
So the supply chain piece I got came from a warehousing class or a transportation class or something like that. So you worked in logistics most of your career?
I did. I spent a few years on the retail side with Hammacher Schlemmer, a catalog retail company. Spent 16 years with Roadway Express in trucking, a few years with DHL, leading the operations of the ground hub up in Ohio. Spent 6 years with the Coca-Cola Company, most of it here in Atlanta. And then for the past 4 years, I've been very fortunate to work with Tosca here in Atlanta as well.
And I noticed you just opened a new service center in Charlotte. So has your background been in any one specific field of logistics or transportation, warehousing, call centers, or what?
Yeah, so mostly in the trucking side, right, the transportation and distribution side. With Coca-Cola, I was more involved in the, I guess I would call it the planning side, the planning the delivery routes, the sales routes, kind of the optimization of the supply chain. And at Tosca, obviously, I lead all of the operations, so I spend a lot of time not just in opening new plants and the real estate side, but the day-to-day production and operations, safety, food safety, which is a huge deal for us, where all of our 14 service centers are ISO 22000 certified, and we've got a phenomenal food safety team that leads that effort. I get involved in engineering and the specification of new equipment to help automate and make lives easier in our production operations.
And I think I heard the answer in a prior statement you just mentioned. What brought you to Atlanta?
Yeah, so Coca-Cola brought me to Atlanta. When I started, I was in Cincinnati in one of the division headquarters. And kind of a funny story, I got involved in a project. Here in Atlanta, I think most folks know about the refranchising work that the Coca-Cola Company has been through. But I got involved in a project that was really designed to optimize and transform the supply chain planning organization. And in that project, I ended up kind of optimizing myself out of a job. We eliminated the role. We did a lot of restructuring to help service customers better. So through that project, eliminated my own job, and I had to apply for a new role that we had created, and I was fortunate enough to be selected for that and relocated the family to Atlanta with Coke.
And I expect it's been a good move.
It was a great move. The Coca-Cola Company is amazing, right? And you talk about actually the kind of the synergy between marketing and supply chain, right? Coca-Cola very much is a marketing company that happens to have one of the best supply chain operations anywhere in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I travel often, and I'm the chatty Cathy on the plane. So be careful if you sit next to me. But I always ask people what they do, and it invariably comes back to me. I'm in supply chain, and people will say, well, what's supply chain? My first question to them is, have you ever bought anything? Anybody that's bought anything is a reason for the supply chain. So everybody's involved with it. So when you in Tosca, you started as the vice president of supply chain.
Correct.
That was your role, and then you were recently promoted.
Yep.
Was that your vision or your plan, or it just happened to be that way?
It happened to be that way, I guess, right? And that would be maybe some advice I would offer. I didn't have a terrific plan for the role that I wanted to end up in. I knew that I wanted to be involved in an organization that made a difference, that gave back to the community, that had corporate social responsibility as a part of its platform. And I, again, very, very, very fortunate, very blessed with a team that helped me get there. But yeah, that was never my destination that I knew I wanted to be, a COO in an organization.
It's interesting you mentioned corporate social responsibility. I'm actively involved with one of our hosts, APICS Atlanta, and corporate social responsibility is a key part of the supply chain. And it sounds like that's maybe a theme in your life, being involved not only with associations but with your community.
Yeah, it is. I'm very involved in our church, although a little less now than I would like to be. I've been an elder for, maybe 10 years, give or take, and that is a wonderful opportunity to give back in a different way. I was involved with the Girl Scouts organization when my daughter was active in that, and again, really neat opportunity to help develop young women leaders in that role and in that organization. I've been involved with APICS for, 10, 11 years now, maybe. And what a wonderful opportunity that's been. Really, really beneficial for me personally, for my own personal growth. And I think that transitioned really nicely into professional growth as well.
And I expect that's had something to do with your career projection, being involved with APICS. That's a little self-promotion plug there, but
yeah, it did. I will tell you, APICS. APICS has always been, for the past 60 years, about individual development. Right? There are, give or take, 125,000 certified people that have been through the APICS program. So APICS certified professionals really touch all corners of supply chain and probably a lot of other roles as well. But you get out of it what you put into it, I believe. If you are only involved in it for the certification, I don't think you're taking the full advantage of everything that APICS has to offer. Not just the personal and the professional development, but the networking, the interaction, the best practice sharing. I've got some of the best friends in the world that I have today. I met through APICS and again helped me grow personally as well.
And you mentioned, I don't know if the audience appreciates, you're involved at the leadership level of APICS.
I am. I again started out just as a member with APICS. I got involved in the corporate advisory board, which again very much an advisory position, not a board member or voting role. But got involved in that. I got involved in the APICS Supply Chain Council, which is it's been called a few things over the years. It was the APICS Foundation. Then when we merged with Supply Chain Council, it became the APICS Supply Chain Council. So got involved there, served as the Treasurer Secretary for the Supply Chain Council Board, and I've been on the APICS board for 2 years now, and actually was just elected as Secretary Treasurer for 2019 on the board, so I'll be an officer next year. But yeah, what a great opportunity it's been to learn and grow.
Is there a progression plan? You're going to be the president of the chapter of the association? Is that how that works?
Yeah, one never knows, right? It's an elected role. I certainly have an interest in pursuing that. That'll be up to the nominating committee and the board on how they choose to vote in the next leadership.
And bringing it down to a local level, you're on the executive advisory board for the APICS Atlanta chapter. That's correct.
I am, yeah, and again, a neat opportunity. So Tosca is an Atlanta-based corporation, and we spend a lot of time and energy here in Atlanta, along with the 13 other cities that we have service centers in. But a neat opportunity to be involved locally in the executive advisory board, meet a lot of the local leaders, and again, learn from them, network, share best practices and ideas and challenges and opportunities that we all face.
As a local chapter with volunteers, we certainly appreciate your input and guidance. Thank you for that.
It has been my pleasure, and you know that's a great point actually. You know, APICS is a volunteer organization, and there's some 2,000 volunteers across the world that help support APICS. So thank you for that as well, for leading on the Atlanta chapter.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Mike, I don't know if you appreciate this. A couple years ago, you came and spoke as a keynote to one of our chapter meetings, and that was for our Hall of Fame breakfast meeting. I don't know if you I'm sure you recall being there.
I do recall it. Yep.
If you recall the reason, but that was actually the inauguration of our at APICS Atlanta Hall of Fame meeting. So you're kind of a part of the history of APICS Atlanta.
Good to be the history of something, I guess, right?
And speaking of Tosca, what do they do, or what are they about?
Yeah, so man, I could talk all day probably about Tosca and what we do. So at our core, we are a reusable packaging company, and we service the perishable food industry. What's interesting, though, I think about Tosca, and we talked earlier about social and corporate responsibility, and I think that's what Tosca is all about, right? So we offer an innovative reusable packaging solution that really is a game changer for grocery retailers. The packaging helps them with shipping and handling perishable foods because it's a smarter, better way to move fresh product from the source all the way to the shelf. It reduces shrink, it reduces labor, it maintains better product quality. So when the consumer goes to purchase perishable foods, it's a better quality, and maybe more interestingly for this crowd is it really does help optimize the overall supply chain and make it a more efficient supply chain.
So where would I, as a general consumer, see your products? Or I can't buy them, I don't think. But
no, you can't. But you have probably purchased things that have moved in one of our containers. So we service the perishable food industry. So if you've ever bought eggs, what's called case-ready meat, meaning that it's processed at a processing center, not a butcher at the back of the store, but eggs, case-ready meat, or produce, then it is probably shipped in a Tosca container. But by design, the container is not the focus. Really, the focus is the product that ships in there. And because of our container, you've purchased a better quality, better protected, fresher product at the retail store.
So you're offering as much as service as much as a product, or maybe a solution.
Yeah, we consider ourselves a supply chain organization, optimizing the customer's supply chain for them by offering a better packaging solution.
Yeah, I'll throw that back to the APICS learning perspective, which we do teach classes in Atlanta. Closed loop supply chain, is that pretty much kind of encapsulates it? Because it's your product, you loan them out, and you take them back.
We lease them out. We don't loan them.
Lease them out. Okay,
that would be a different organization.
Yes.
Yeah, so we actually operate two different supply chain networks. One of them is a very closed loop where you would find, for example, bagged salads is a great example of a closed loop supply chain for us, where we ship the container to the farmer, and at harvest they harvest lettuce, cabbage, carrots, things like that. Pack it directly into our container. It goes to the bagged salad organization where they clean it and process it and make it a salad, and then the container comes back to one of our 14 service centers where it's cleaned, sanitized, sterilized, repaired if needed, and then shipped back out. So that is very much a closed loop. We also have open loop customers where the container goes to, for example, a Tyson meat processing plant. They package the case-ready steaks. It goes to retail, where it may go through a retail distribution center out to a retail store for consumer purchase, and then it comes back to a sort center that's operated by the retailer.
And not to get into competitive information, but that sounds like a lot of your product traceability that you have to. I mean, if they're assets to you, you have to make sure you know where they are and get them back. How is that done?
Yep. So we've got an amazing asset management team. All of our containers are either barcoded or RFID tagged. So we do track them through the entire supply chain. Having that traceability enables blockchain for our customers as well, so that they can use our unique license plate on the container to track the product all the way from field to fork if needed.
Yes, another good APICS term, RFID. I like that. Thank you. And blockchain. Everybody has to talk about blockchain when they're talking about supply chain management. Did I recently see in the news that Tosca was awarded a Best Places to Work?
Yeah, we were actually. So for this year, we were awarded one of the top workplaces in Atlanta. We're unbelievably proud of that. We're very excited about it. We're actually hopeful that we can secure that honor again this year. I can't talk enough about the team that we have at Tosca. We've got amazing people, not just in Atlanta, but throughout our entire network, and that's what made that award possible for us.
And I expect that has a lot to do with excellent leadership, perhaps. Yeah.
Well, we've got great leadership. Not just me. We've got just phenomenal leadership, but at all levels. We've got people that really take ownership, and I think that's what makes Tosca great and unique. I think to be a great organization, people that do the work have to understand how they're connected directly to the mission and the vision, right? When they come to work, they should know what value they provide to the organization. And I think we enable that at Tosca. We have very much the open door policy. It is not uncommon at all for our CEO, my boss, to pick up the phone and call a production supervisor and ask them questions. So we're very, very connected. Folks really understand the value that they bring. I've been involved in companies where you feel like if you didn't show up for a few days, nobody would really notice, except maybe your cube or your office might be empty. At Tosca, everybody brings value. Everybody understands how they're connected to the mission and the vision of the organization, and I think that really makes it a great place to work.
And I noticed also it's not all about APICS. You're involved with other associations as well.
I am. So I also have the honor of serving on the Reusable Packaging Association Board of Directors. Much different organization than APICS. It is very focused on the organization rather than the individual. But again, a really neat association focused on sustainable packaging and bringing more reusable packaging to the market.
So I guess the theme here, Mike, is from my perspective, get involved. Do you recommend maybe last words of wisdom for anybody, career advice? Or?
Yeah, I will tell you, you hear a lot of folks, especially around election time, right, say if you don't vote, you can't complain. But I would say in the workplace, if you don't show up, if you're not the one to raise your hand and volunteer and get involved, take on new challenges, then you're probably not going to be a part of the outcome as well. So that's been kind of how I've chosen to live my life and my career, is to be involved. I like to be a part of the solution and a part of that conversation. And I think that's helped me with my career because it positions me better. I understand the outcomes a little bit better because I was a part of it. So, yeah, my advice would be get involved. Decisions are made by the people that show up every day. So if you want to be a part of the solution, then you got to show up.
Yep, I've always heard life is a game. Might as well play. Well, Mike, any last words of wisdom? Anything else before we wrap?
No, just to say, Chris, thanks very much for having me. I love talking about Tosca and the great things that we've got going on there, and the terrific people that I get to work with every day. And anytime I can do that, I'm honored to be a part of it.
Well, as I had mentioned, as a local leader for APICS Atlanta, I greatly appreciate the time that you give to us, giving us guidance as an Atlanta homeowner and taxpayer. I appreciate you guys bringing jobs to the area. But Mike, thanks again for sharing with us today. And be sure to check out past sessions on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or our site at supplychainnowradio.com. This is Chris Barnes, host of Supply Chain Now Radio, spotlighting the best in all things supply chain, the people, the companies, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. Thanks for learning.